Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Welcome everyone. Good day. Ito po si Sir E and welcome to SS041. This is the life and works of Jose Rizal. Sa umaga pong ito, sa araw pong ito, our discussion will be concentrating on the context of Rizal, the world scenario during his time. So here we will be discussing what was taking place in the world right at the time that Rizal was born and even at the time that he was uh, living, and also at the time that he was gaining his consciousness of nationalism and heroism. And so here again is the context of Rizal, the world scenario during his time. Now, the world in Rizal's time is very much different. Many European countries, aside from Spain, held colonies across the globe, but these other European countries were efficient in building and maintaining their empires. And so when we talk about these empires, we know that Rizal lived at a time that the world was divided into empires. Some men were free, while some were not. Now, you have here the French Empire, you have the British Empire, the Dutch Empire, you have the Russian Empire, the British Empire, of course, we've already discussed this a while ago. Okay, and then you have the Spanish Empire. So kung makikita nyo po dito, ito po yung mga nasasakop ng Spanish Empire. So if you can see the darker colors here, so dyan po nakakoncentrate yung imperyo ng Espanya. And of course, okay, you'll see here, unti-unti pong nalalagas yung Spanish Empire. Now, from 1861 to 1896, there were two main characteristics of the world. The first one is, of course, okay, unang-una po dito, of course, is the rise of liberalism. And the second one is the decline of the Spanish Empire. These were the two characteristics of the world back in the 1800s. Now, when we speak of the rise of liberalism, we say that this is the concept where democracy was becoming a popular idea, where the concepts of equality of men were upheld and also the human rights were upheld. And that was rapidly spreading across Europe. And also, this was during the time that kings gave up their powers to govern to non-royal blooded people in the parliament. There was also this transition from monarchy to democracy. When we talk about monarchy, of course, ito po yung pinag-uusapan natin na ang paglilid sa isang bansa ay pinangungunahan ng mga hari at ng mga reyna. And of course, monarchy still exists at the moment. However, there is less power of the monarchs this day than there has been before, okay, during this time. Okay, so there was already a transition from monarchy to democracy. And when we speak of democracy, of course, this is the kind of leadership of a country where the authority solely lies on the people. Now, during the period of liberalism, of course, we see the special world events in 1861. Now, 1861, remember, was the year that Dr. Rizal was born, and the world was already experiencing many events related to the rise of liberalism. Okay, so you see here the appeasement of 23 million farmers in Russia. Okay, so there was the appeasement of the 23 million farmers in Russia. Okay, next to that, of course, before 1861, we know that Russia followed the serfdom system, where private landowners get 1/3 of the harvest from the serfs who till their land. Okay, and of course, in 1861, the Tsar Alexander II abolished the serfdom system in the whole Russian Empire. And so the farmers were no longer the landlords and can now own lands. Okay, so there was also the freedom of the U.S. slaves. So you see here on your screen from Russia to U.S. Again, this is in the context of what was taking place, okay, at a time of Dr. Rizal. Now we talk about the slave trade. Before 1861, white Americans kept black slaves in their homes and plantations. Okay, in the United States, President Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery at this time. Okay, and then from USA we'll go to Mexico. And in Mexico, before 1861, Mexican presidents were mestizo looking, okay, descendants of Spanish colonizers. Okay, Juanito Suarez became that. Okay, while liberalism was spreading in the West, the Spanish Empire started decaying. Okay, now let's look at the decline of the Spanish Empire. Now, there are probable reasons why these happened. The first one is because of the corruption of the colonial government, and it was very much evident, particularly in the colonial government here in the Philippines. Another one was the union of the church and the state. There was supposed to be a separation. Okay, the other empires have the separation of these. However, because of the union of the church and the state, in particular in the context of the Philippines, particularly during the time of Rizal, where the church seemed to be more powerful than those who are running, okay, the state. Okay, and another one, the unjust treatment of the people in the colonies. They were looked down, okay, by the Spanish government. Say, for example, in the Philippines, we were thought to be Indios, okay, and that is a derogatory term again, meaning stupid, barbaric, or what have you. Now, what we're trying to point out here is that these were the reasons why the Spanish Empire started declining. Okay, so if we're going to look at the Spanish colonies like Mexico, Argentina, Peru, and others, they all got independent in the early 1800s. Meaning, kung papansinin ho natin, mas maaga ho silang nakuha ang kanilang mga kalayaan kesa sa ating bansa. Okay, of course, when we talk about the first declaration of independence in the Philippines, that was 1898. However, with the likes of Mexico, Argentina, Peru, they got their independence already back in the early 1800s. They fought a war of independence before Spain, and they won. And so these were the prevailing situations and circumstances surrounding the birth, okay, and the context on which Dr. Rizal was born and was raised. Okay, this was what has happening at least around the world at these times. So if you're going to look on your screen right now, back in the 1790s, you will see here the Spanish Empire. Okay? So, if you're going to look at the Spanish Empire, mapapansin po natin dito na ito yung laki ng Spanish Empire back in 1790. So, of course, their empire was concentrated in South and Central America. Okay, and then you have some portions here, and of course in Asia you have the Philippines. However, if you're going to look at this one, okay, if you are going to look at the Spanish Empire now back in 1898, you will see now the decline of the power of the Spanish government, okay, in their colonies. Okay, much more so if we are going to look at 1898, where the Philippines was already gaining ground towards independence. So this was the decline of the Spanish Empire. When Rizal was born, Spain had already lost all of its colonies. At ang naiwan na lamang po dito were Philippines, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. So you will see na ang Pilipinas ay isa na lamang sa mga iilan mabibilang sa daliri na mga nasasakupan ng Espanya noong mga kapanahunan pong ito, because again, the Spanish government has already lost control of a lot of their empire, okay, before the birth. Okay, and when Rizal was raised as well. So, ang kanyang isip ay puno na ng ideya ng tungkol sa kalayaan, much more so when he left the Philippines and started becoming an ilustrado and started working his way and started writing his masterpieces, his novels on the likes of No Limitangere and El Filibusterismo. Okay, now the natives in these colonies, say for example in Philippines and in Cuba, soon slowly learned of what happened in the other Spanish colonies, and they started having thoughts of having a revolution too. That is very important. So, nakita nila kung papaano po yung ilang mga nasasakupan ng Imperyong Espanya ay unti-unting nakalaya. And of course, they were encouraged to do the same. That's why they started having thoughts of having a revolution too. And so if we're going to look at the context of Dr. Jose Rizal, we will find here that the time was already ripe for the opening of the minds of the Filipinos and for staging a revolution versus Spain. You see here the concept of liberalism, the concept of democracy, the Spanish regime slowly losing their ground on their colonized countries and whatnot. And so Rizal was born at the right time, in the right place, and he would be instrumental in making the independence of the Philippines happen. And this is the context of Rizal, the world scenario during his time. Thank you for joining me today. I hope we learned from what was going on in the world of Dr. Jose Rizal when he was born and when nung siya po ay nabubuhay. Marami pong salamat for joining me again. Again, this has been Sir E, your online instructor facilitator, and this has been SS041, the life and works of Jose Rizal. Stay safe, stay sane, stay strong. Maraming salamat po. Until next time, God bless you all.